Jamal sat on the edge of a park bench, shivering as the evening breeze cut through his thin jacket. He was only 14, but life had already been tough on him. For as long as he could remember, he had lived on the streets of the busy city. People walked by him every day, their faces buried in their phones or lost in their own thoughts. To them, he was invisible, just another homeless boy blending into the background. But Jamal was far from ordinary. Despite his struggles, he had a kind heart and a special connection with animals. He often spent his time feeding birds with crumbs he found or patting stray cats that wandered near him. At least animals don't judge, he thought to himself. Tonight, however, his stomach growled louder than usual. It had been 2 days since he'd eaten anything more than scraps left behind at a food truck. His stomach twisted in hunger, but Jamal had grown used to it. Survival meant patience, even if it was hard. The city's streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Jamal leaned back and looked at the stars, something he did when he felt hopeless. They seemed so far away, untouched by the noise and chaos of the city. "I wonder what it feels like to be up there," he whispered, imagining himself floating in a peaceful, quiet sky. The sound of a trash can falling snapped him out of his thoughts. Startled, Jamal turned toward the noise. A shadowy figure darted into the alley behind a nearby diner. His first instinct was to ignore it. Trouble often hid in the dark corners of the city, but something tugged at his heart. Was it an animal? A person? He couldn't leave without knowing. Gathering his courage, Jamal walked toward the alley. His worn-out sneakers scraped against the pavement as he moved closer. The faint whimper of something caught his ear. It was soft and weak, almost like a cry for help. His heart raced as he stepped into the dim alley, his eyes adjusting to the faint glow of a flickering bulb overhead. That's when he saw it. A dog. Its fur was matted and dirty, its body frail and trembling. Jamal knelt down slowly, careful not to scare the poor animal. "Hey, buddy," he whispered softly. The dog's eyes opened slightly, and Jamal could see the pain in them. It was hurt, maybe starving, and clearly in desperate need of help. Jamal's heart ached. He knew what it felt like to be hungry, to feel forgotten, and to wonder if anyone cared. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'll help you." Without a second thought, Jamal removed his jacket and draped it over the shivering dog. He rummaged through his small backpack, pulling out the last piece of bread he had saved for himself. Breaking it into small bits, he held it out to the dog, who weakly nibbled on it. Jamal's stomach growled again, but he ignored it. Saving this dog felt more important than his own hunger. As the night grew colder, Jamal sat beside the dog, stroking its head gently. He whispered soft words, promising it would be okay. For the first time in days, he didn't feel so alone. Little did he know, this moment would change his life forever. The following morning, Jamal woke up early to the sound of city traffic and the bustling noises of people getting ready for their day. His body ached from sleeping on the cold ground, but he ignored it. The dog, Buddy, as Jamal had named him, was still lying next to him. It was amazing how such a small act of kindness could make him feel a little less lonely. Jamal noticed that Buddy had eaten all the bread he had given him the night before. The dog's coat still looked rough and dirty, but he seemed a little stronger now. Buddy wagged his tail when Jamal gently petted his head, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Jamal smiled. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" he said quietly. Jamal looked around the alley. It was still early, and the streets were mostly empty. The cold was starting to settle in again, and he knew he had to do something for Buddy. He didn't want to leave him there. The dog needed more than just food and warmth. He needed real care. Jamal's mind raced. The nearest animal shelter was several miles away, and he didn't have any money to pay for Buddy's care. He sighed. What could he do? He looked down at Buddy, whose eyes were now wide open and alert, clearly watching him. Jamal thought about how much he wished someone could help him the way he was trying to help Buddy. But right now, he was all Buddy had. After a moment of deep thought, Jamal made a decision. He stood up and carefully helped Buddy to his feet. "Come on, boy," Jamal whispered. The dog's legs wobbled as he tried to stand, but with Jamal's support he managed. Jamal felt a surge of determination. He would not leave this dog behind. They walked slowly down the alley, Jamal supporting Buddy as best as he could. The city seemed so big and overwhelming, but Jamal was focused. He had seen the signs for an animal shelter a few blocks away. It wasn't the best place, but it was a start. Buddy needed medical attention, and Jamal was going to make sure he got it. The city around him bustled with people, cars honking, and shops opening. Most people walked by without noticing Jamal and Buddy, but Jamal wasn't discouraged. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, and this time, he wasn't going to let that stop him from helping Buddy. He would be the one to stand out, to do something kind, even if no one else saw it. When they finally reached the animal shelter, Jamal stood at the door for a moment, unsure if they would even let him inside. He was just a homeless boy with a sick dog, but he had to try. With a deep breath, Jamal pushed open the door and walked in. A woman behind the counter looked up and blinked, surprised by their sudden arrival. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but skeptical. Jamal swallowed hard and said, "Please, my dog. He's hurt. I don't know what to do. Can you help us?" The woman stared at them for a long moment. Then her expression softened. "Let me see him." Jamal gently helped Buddy to the counter. The woman examined the dog closely, noting the dog's weakness and injuries. She sighed, but there was a look of understanding in her eyes. "Come with me," she said, her tone kinder now. Jamal felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Buddy would be okay. Jamal followed the woman into a small room at the back of the shelter. The walls were lined with cages, each one holding a dog or cat. Some animals barked or meowed. Others sat quietly, watching Jamal and Buddy. The air smelled of disinfectant and fresh bedding. It wasn't the cleanest place, but it was better than the streets. The woman, whose name was Sarah, gently helped Jamal lift Buddy onto an examination table. She started to check the dog's wounds carefully. Jamal watched nervously, his heart pounding. He had done his best to care for Buddy, but he wasn't sure it would be enough. "Don't worry, we'll take care of him," Sarah said, as if she could read Jamal's mind. She was smiling, but Jamal could see that she was concerned about Buddy's condition. She gently cleaned Buddy's cuts and bruises, checking his legs and torso for any broken bones. Buddy whimpered softly, but Jamal stayed close, stroking his head to comfort him. He hated seeing Buddy in pain, but at least he wasn't alone anymore. Jamal couldn't help but feel a little proud. Despite everything, he had managed to get Buddy to safety. After a few minutes, Sarah finished her examination and looked at Jamal with a serious expression. "This dog is weak, but he's not giving up. He has a strong will to survive, just like you," she said, her voice warm. "He'll need a few days to recover, and we'll keep him here for now. But you've done something amazing, bringing him here." Jamal felt his chest swell with pride. He had saved Buddy's life, and now he had a chance to be healthy again. It felt like a small victory in a world that often seemed too big and too harsh. Sarah gave Buddy a small injection to help with the pain, and then she moved to the other side of the room to prepare a bed for him. While she worked, Jamal sat on a nearby chair, his legs sore from standing so long. He didn't mind, though. He was happy that Buddy was getting the care he needed. For the first time in days, Jamal felt like he had done something right. He felt like he wasn't just a boy on the streets. He was someone who could make a difference. As Sarah finished preparing Buddy's bed, she turned to Jamal. "You've done more than just help a dog today," she said. "You've shown me that there's more good in the world than I realized." Jamal blinked, unsure if she meant what she said. He wasn't used to getting compliments, especially not for things like this. But there was something in her eyes that made him believe her. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," Jamal explained quietly. "Buddy needed me, and I couldn't just leave him out there. I didn't have much to give, but I gave him what I could." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "That's the kind of heart the world needs more of." Jamal didn't know what to say. He felt a little embarrassed, but also proud in a way he hadn't expected. As he watched Sarah carefully settle Buddy into the bed, he realized that he had done the right thing. He wasn't just helping Buddy, he was helping himself too. Jamal returned to the animal shelter the next day, as he had promised. His feet were tired from walking the long distance, but nothing could stop him from seeing Buddy again. He had grown attached to the dog during the few hours they had spent together, and he couldn't help but worry about how Buddy was doing. When he arrived at the shelter, Sarah greeted him with a warm smile. "He's doing better," she said, noticing the concern on Jamal's face. "But he's still not out of the woods yet. We're doing everything we can to help him." Jamal breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ease the weight on his shoulders. "I'm glad," he said, his voice soft. Sarah led him to the back room where Buddy lay on a comfortable bed. The dog was resting, but his eyes flickered open as soon as Jamal entered the room. He wagged his tail slowly, as if to say, "I'm still here." Jamal walked over to the bed and knelt beside Buddy. "Hey boy," he said quietly, running his hand gently through the dog's fur. "You're going to make it, aren't you?" Buddy looked up at him with those big, soulful eyes. Jamal smiled, feeling a little lighter in his heart. Even though Buddy was still weak, Jamal knew that they had both been through something difficult together, and they weren't giving up. Over the next few days, Jamal visited Buddy as often as he could. He didn't have much money or food, but he always brought something, whether it was a piece of bread or just a few coins to buy a drink for himself. He didn't mind. Seeing Buddy improve little by little was enough to keep him going. Each time Jamal walked through the shelter doors, Sarah gave him updates on Buddy's progress. "He's eating more," she said one day, "and he's walking a little better. We're keeping an eye on him, but I think he's going to pull through." Jamal couldn't believe it. When he first found Buddy, the dog was barely able to move, and he had been so close to giving up. Now, Buddy was showing signs of recovery, and Jamal felt proud of what they had accomplished together. But despite Buddy's improvement, there was still one big problem: money. Sarah had explained that while the shelter would continue to care for Buddy, they needed funding for treatment, medicine, and food. The shelter was already stretched thin, and Jamal knew they couldn't keep Buddy for long without help. Jamal felt torn. He didn't have any way to pay for Buddy's care. His own life on the streets was hard enough. What could he possibly do to help the dog he had saved? The answer came when Sarah suggested he go to a local charity event. "It's a fundraiser for animals," she explained. "If you tell them Buddy's story, they might help cover the costs. It's worth a shot." Jamal hesitated. He didn't know anything about charity events, and the thought of speaking in front of people made him nervous. But he couldn't give up on Buddy now. He had come so far. "I'll do it," Jamal said, his voice full of determination. He wasn't sure how, but he knew he had to try. For Buddy's sake. The following weekend, Jamal found himself standing in front of a large building that he had never seen before. The sign above the door read, "City Hall Charity Event for Animal Welfare." Jamal's heart pounded as he looked up at the big building. It was much more impressive than the small shelter he had visited. People in fancy clothes were walking in and out of the building, chatting and laughing. Jamal felt out of place in his worn-out jacket and old sneakers. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should go in. But then he thought about Buddy, lying in the shelter, still recovering but needing more help. Jamal took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when Buddy needed him. When Jamal stepped into the building, he was greeted by a woman at the door. She was dressed in a professional suit and smiled at him kindly. "Welcome to our event," she said. "How can I help you?" Jamal's voice shook slightly, but he managed to speak. "I'm here for the animals. I have a dog. He's hurt, and I don't have money to pay for his care. I was told there might be a chance to get help." The woman's smile didn't fade. "Of course," she said warmly. "If you'd like, you can speak with someone inside. There are people here who can help." Jamal felt a little more at ease as the woman led him into the main hall. The room was filled with people chatting, laughing, and enjoying their food. Large banners on the walls showed pictures of animals, and there were several tables set up to collect donations for the shelter and animal care organizations. Jamal looked around, feeling a little nervous. Everyone else seemed so confident and at ease, but he knew he had to try. He had to speak for Buddy. The woman led him to a small table where a man sat with a clipboard. He looked up when Jamal approached. "How can I help you, young man?" he asked kindly. Jamal took a deep breath and started telling his story. "I found a dog in the streets. He was hurt, and I couldn't just leave him there. I brought him to a shelter, but they don't have enough money to help him properly. I'm just trying to do what I can for him." His voice grew stronger as he spoke, and he felt a little less nervous. The man listened carefully, nodding. "It's brave of you to care for that dog," he said. "I can see you really care about him. Let's see what we can do." He made a note on his clipboard before looking up again. "There's a special fund for situations like this. I'll make sure Buddy gets the help he needs. Don't worry." Jamal's heart soared. He couldn't believe it. Someone was actually going to help. The man smiled at him. "You've done something amazing, young man. Not everyone would have the courage to help an animal the way you did. You've earned this support." Jamal felt his throat tighten with emotion. It was hard to believe that something so simple as caring for a dog could lead to this kind of kindness. He had done what he could, and now it felt like the world was finally starting to see him, not just as a homeless boy, but as someone who could make a difference. As the man made arrangements for Buddy's care, Jamal couldn't stop smiling. He knew that things were still tough, but now there was hope. For Buddy and for himself. The next few days felt like a blur to Jamal. After the charity event, things began to change quickly. Buddy was receiving the care he needed at the shelter, and Jamal continued to visit him every day. He felt a sense of relief, knowing that the dog he had saved was on the road to recovery. But something else was happening that Jamal hadn't expected. One afternoon, as Jamal walked to the shelter, he noticed people staring at him. At first, he thought he had done something wrong. He shifted uncomfortably, looking around. But then he heard someone say, "Isn't that the boy who saved that dog? The one with the German Shepherd?" Jamal froze in his tracks. He didn't know what to say. People were talking about him. A boy who lived on the streets, someone no one usually noticed, was now the subject of conversation. Jamal felt a bit confused, but also a little proud. How could this be happening? That evening, as Jamal sat outside the shelter, Sarah came to find him. She looked excited, and Jamal noticed she was holding her phone in her hand. "Jamal," she said, "you won't believe this. Someone posted a picture of you and Buddy on social media. Your story is going viral." Jamal stared at her in surprise. He didn't know what that meant, but Sarah quickly explained. "It's everywhere. People are sharing the story about how you saved Buddy. They're amazed by your kindness. A lot of people want to help." Jamal's mind raced. He had never thought of his actions as anything special. He had simply done what felt right, helping the dog in need. But now, his simple act of kindness was spreading across the city. It made him feel like he was part of something bigger than himself. Sarah showed him the post on her phone. The picture of Jamal sitting beside Buddy, looking down at the dog with such care, was being shared by hundreds of people. There were comments from strangers saying things like, "This boy is a hero," and "I wish there were more people like him in the world." Some people even said they wanted to donate money to help with Buddy's care. Jamal felt a mix of emotions. He never wanted attention, but now that it was happening, he realized that this could be the break he needed. The donations would help the shelter, and maybe even help Buddy find a permanent home. It was a chance for Jamal to be seen not as the homeless boy everyone ignored, but as someone who had done something good. As the days went on, more people reached out to the shelter, offering their support. The local news even contacted Sarah to ask for an interview. They wanted to know more about the boy who had saved a dog and what had motivated him. At first, Jamal was nervous about speaking in front of a camera. But Sarah encouraged him, saying his story was powerful and could inspire others. Jamal finally agreed to the interview, and when the day came, he stood in front of the camera, trying to remember what to say. The reporter smiled at him. "Jamal, you've become a symbol of kindness to many people. How does it feel to know that your story is touching so many hearts?" Jamal took a deep breath. "I just did what I thought was right. I didn't expect any of this. I'm just glad Buddy is going to be okay. And if my story helps others be kind too, then that's the best part." The reporter nodded, impressed. "You're an inspiration, Jamal. Thank you for sharing your story with us." As the interview ended, Jamal felt a strange sense of pride. He had done something good, and now the world was starting to see it. It wasn't just about saving Buddy anymore. It was about showing others that even small acts of kindness could make a big difference. The days that followed were nothing like Jamal had ever imagined. His story, along with Buddy's recovery, continued to spread across the city. Jamal was still coming to the shelter every day, visiting Buddy, and feeling proud to see how much better the dog was getting. But one morning, as Jamal was walking to the shelter, something unexpected happened. A city official, dressed in a suit and tie, approached him. "Are you Jamal?" the man asked, his voice calm but serious. Jamal nodded, feeling a little nervous. "Yes, that's me." The man smiled, though it was clear he had something important to say. "I'm with the mayor's office. We've heard about your story, and we'd like to invite you to City Hall tomorrow." Jamal's heart skipped a beat. City Hall. The mayor's office. Why would they want to see him? He was just a homeless boy who had saved a dog. The idea of going to such an important place made Jamal feel out of place, but the official's calm, reassuring tone made him feel like this was something special. "Why would the mayor want to see me?" Jamal asked, his voice full of confusion. The man explained. "The mayor has been following your story, and he believes your actions are a shining example of the kindness that can make our community stronger. He wants to meet you and discuss how he can support you and others who want to help in similar ways." Jamal stood there for a moment, trying to process the news. He had never imagined something like this would happen. He had simply helped Buddy because it was the right thing to do. But now he was being invited to meet the mayor of the city. I don't know what to say," Jamal finally replied, feeling a little overwhelmed. The official smiled warmly. "You don't have to say anything. Just come and see what the mayor has in mind. We'll be waiting for you." The next day, Jamal found himself walking nervously toward City Hall. His heart raced as he entered the building, feeling even more out of place than before. Everything was so grand. Shiny floors, large paintings on the walls, and people walking around with important looks on their faces. Jamal's sneakers seemed too loud against the marble floors, and he couldn't help but feel like everyone was staring at him. The official from yesterday greeted him and led him through the halls. "You're doing great, Jamal," he said kindly, as though sensing Jamal's nerves. When they reached the mayor's office, Jamal was led inside. The mayor, a kind-looking man in his 50s, stood up to greet him. "Jamal, it's a pleasure to meet you," the mayor said with a warm smile. "Your story has touched so many hearts, including mine." Jamal was speechless. He hadn't expected this kind of attention, and he wasn't sure how to respond. The mayor continued, "What you did for Buddy shows the best of what humanity can offer. You've shown us all that even in tough times, kindness and compassion can make a real difference. I'm here to tell you that you are important, Jamal, and we want to help." Jamal's mind raced. This was all happening so fast. The mayor went on, explaining how the city could offer him a scholarship, help him find a safe place to stay, and even offer him a job at a local animal shelter if he was interested. Jamal could hardly believe it. "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice shaky. "You don't have to say anything, Jamal," the mayor replied. "You've already shown us what it means to care, and that's enough. We're here to support you and make sure you have the chance to build a better future." Jamal felt tears welling up in his eyes. It was overwhelming to hear such kind words, and even more so to realize that someone believed in him. The boy who had once been invisible to the world was now being offered a chance to make a new life. Jamal walked out of City Hall feeling like he was in a dream. He had just met the mayor, and his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. As he made his way back to the shelter, his mind raced. He couldn't believe that just a few days ago, he had been a homeless boy on the streets with nothing but his jacket and a few crumbs to eat. Now he had a chance at a new life, one full of hope and possibilities. When Jamal arrived at the shelter, Sarah was there, taking care of the animals. She looked up in surprise when she saw him. "Jamal, you're back early. What happened?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity. Jamal smiled, his heart full of excitement. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this. The mayor invited me to his office today. He wants to help me. He's offering me a scholarship to go to school, a place to stay, and even a job at the animal shelter. It's all happening so fast." Sarah's eyes widened with disbelief. "Jamal, that's incredible. You've been given such an amazing opportunity. You really deserve it." Jamal felt a mix of emotions, happiness, disbelief, and even a little bit of fear. He had never imagined that anything like this could happen to him. He had always thought that people like him, homeless and forgotten, never got chances like this. But here he was, standing in front of someone who believed in him. It felt like everything he had dreamed about was finally within reach. Over the next few weeks, Jamal's life started to change. He moved into a small apartment that the city had arranged for him, and he began attending school. At first, it was difficult to adjust. He had never been in a classroom before, and he had to catch up on a lot of lessons. But he was determined. Every day, he worked hard, studying late into the night to make sure he understood everything. Buddy, of course, came with him. The shelter had helped the dog recover fully, and now Buddy was thriving. He was stronger, his coat was shining, and he had a new leash on life, just like Jamal. The two of them were inseparable. Every day after school, Jamal would take Buddy to the park, where they would run together, both of them full of energy and joy. As Jamal settled into his new routine, he realized that he had found a place where he truly belonged. He was no longer just a boy on the streets. He was someone with a future. He was someone who could make a difference. One afternoon after school, Jamal stood in front of his new apartment, looking out at the city. He thought about everything he had gone through to get here, the loneliness, the hunger, the struggles. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that he had made it. He had saved Buddy, and in doing so, he had saved himself. It was in that moment that Jamal knew he would never forget where he came from. He would never forget the streets, the tough times, or the people who helped him along the way. But now he had the chance to create something better, a life full of hope, opportunity, and love. And as he looked down at Buddy, who was wagging his tail excitedly, Jamal smiled. Together, they had overcome so much. And now, they were ready to face whatever the future held. Let me know if you need any changes, or if you'd like to proceed with something else. A few months had passed since Jamal's life changed. He had settled into a new routine, balancing his schoolwork, his job at the animal shelter, and his time spent with Buddy. It wasn't always easy. Some days were harder than others, and there were times when Jamal felt overwhelmed. But every time he looked at Buddy, he was reminded of how far they had come together. Jamal had made friends at school, something he had never thought would happen. At first, he was shy and unsure of himself, but as he worked hard, people started to notice. They saw that he was kind, determined, and always willing to help others. Slowly but surely, Jamal became part of something bigger than just himself. He became part of a community that cared. One day, as Jamal walked out of his classroom, a girl from his class stopped him. "Hey, Jamal," she said with a smile. "I just wanted to tell you that you're really inspiring. You've been through so much, but you still show up every day, ready to work hard. It's amazing." Jamal blushed, feeling a little embarrassed. He hadn't expected anyone to notice. "Thanks," he replied, scratching the back of his head. "I'm just doing my best." The girl smiled again. "Well, your best is really something. You're showing all of us that even when things are tough, you can make a difference. I think that's something we could all learn from." Jamal couldn't help but smile. Her words meant more than he could express. It was a reminder that his actions, no matter how small they seemed, were having an impact on those around him. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving, and he was inspiring others to do the same. As Jamal continued to settle into his new life, he began to think about his future. The mayor's scholarship had opened up so many doors for him, and Jamal knew he wanted to make the most of it. He loved working at the animal shelter and spending time with the animals, and he realized that he wanted to help even more. Maybe one day he could open his own shelter, a place where animals like Buddy could find safety and love. But for now, Jamal focused on the present. He finished his school year with excellent grades, earning the respect of both his teachers and classmates. At the animal shelter, he worked hard, cleaning cages, feeding the animals, and helping with adoptions. Buddy was always by his side, a reminder of the journey they had taken together. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Jamal sat outside his apartment with Buddy, watching the sunset. The city was peaceful, and the cool breeze felt refreshing after the heat of the day. Jamal felt content, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He thought about the hardships he had faced, the loneliness, the hunger, the fear of never being seen. But those days felt far away now. Jamal had found his place in the world, and he knew he wasn't alone anymore. He had Buddy, who had been there through it all, and he had people who cared about him. Jamal looked down at Buddy, who was lying beside him, his tail wagging happily. "We made it, Buddy," Jamal whispered. "Together, we made it." The dog looked up at him, as if understanding every word. Jamal smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he couldn't describe. It wasn't just love for Buddy. It was the love he had found for himself, the belief that he could create a better future. And as the sun set behind the city, Jamal knew that his story wasn't over. It was just beginning. With Buddy by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that anything was possible.